that have also come into us here on Sky News as this breaking news unfolds this evening. This is of the plane crash site. That is the plane crash with 10 passengers on board. 8 bodies, that's according to the Reuters news agency. 8 bodies recovered so far. 10 passengers were supposed to be on board. Among those 10, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the boss of the Wagner mercenary group, working for President Putin, most recently in the war in Ukraine. Unconfirmed whether he was on board, unconfirmed if he is among those killed, but a significant figure nonetheless. I'm joined by Michael Bociurkiw, Senior Fellow at Atlantic Council, former OSCE spokesperson too. Michael, you have covered Russia and spoken to us about what's going on in Ukraine many times. Your reaction to this, seemingly perhaps, if indeed President Putin's behind it, straight out of his playbook?
Sure, it's definitely straight out of a Putin playbook to get rid of opponents. I'm in Johannesburg right now for the BRICS Summit. And of course, there's going to be a lot of interest in finding out whether, in fact, this was the case that Prigozhin was killed. As you know, the Wagner Group has deep interests here, not only extraction of blood diamonds and gold, but also an arm of the Russian state security service in terms of providing security to a lot of belligerents here. Normally, one would expect Mr. Putin and his cronies to get rid of opponents through traditional means, poison umbrella tip or cocktail. But this, if proven true, is very, very brazen and probably in their minds, so what if there were any people not related to Prigozhin on board?
And of course, we don't know if he was indeed on board, Michael. Speaking earlier to Boris Bondarev, he said he's full of surprises. So we are erring on the side of caution tonight on Sky News, but a significant figure nonetheless.
Yes, indeed. You know, when the so-called coup was staged and then there was a disappearance for a while of Prigozhin, I said at the time that I don't believe we would see him disappearing into Belarus and, driving a tractor, digging potato fields, nor would he disappear here. He's been very active, quite the jet setter. In fact, he was filmed north of here in the Sahel just recently, saying that the Wagner Group is basically alive and well. So maybe it all became too much for Mr. Putin. Two egos don't survive well in the same bubble. And my question here, and you're right, we have to be very careful what we say at the moment, but if Prigozhin and Wagner is now out of the equation, who is going to take over that very, very lucrative business here in Africa to fund the Putin war machine? I don't think the Russian state security services or security services such as Gazprom, a few others have the ability to do that just yet.
And also an extraordinary plane crash to witness, Michael. At the same time, President Putin on stage at a concert marking the Kursk victory, speaking quite fiercely about victors and adversaries.
It would be straight out of the Putin playbook to appear as if he's going about business as usual and doing other things and has nothing to do with this. But I think that this is something, in terms of what we're seeing on the screen right now, it is out of their playbook. I mean, you know what probably came to mind when I saw this down aircraft. It was MH17. We well know the Russians have the capability of striking aircraft at very, very high altitude as well. So that would be also straight out of their playbook too. We have to be careful again. We also have to remember that this also could have been Prigozhin staging a disappearance in some twisted way. So it remains to be seen what exactly happened here.
And Michael, in terms of the significance of Prigozhin vis-a-vis the Wagner Group and leading the Wagner Group, if indeed he was on this plane and if indeed he has been killed, we are looking a little bit ahead here, but what do you think the impact will be on the Wagner Group and what happens on the ground in Ukraine?
Yeah, well, first of all, what happens in Russia, if I may, I think actually the Wagner Group misread Russian public opinion, that they had more support than they thought when they staged the coup. I don't think the remnants of the group would be able to cause much trouble. And in terms of the war in Ukraine, I think they were mostly already subtracted from that period of war, basically handing it over to the Russian Ministry of Defense. But I was watching the Ukrainian Telegram channels, as you might imagine, lots of joy and celebration of these reports. But we all know how poorly the Russian military has performed on the Ukrainian battlefront. So it's not going to help them in that regard. But what we are seeing, broadening out the picture a little bit, is Russia is increasingly turning more to those long-range missiles, those drones, to execute their aggression in Ukraine. And this is very scary stuff. I'm temporarily based in Odessa. We see it close up. They're doing more and more of this. So now you basically have two battlefronts, the physical one in eastern Ukraine, as well as the long-range one. And that's a very, very difficult position for Ukraine to be in at the moment, and especially because of the slowness that the counteroffensive is happening.
And Michael, of course, we've talked about being straight out of Putin's playbook in terms of how he deals with adversaries. There is also, of course, an ICC arrest warrant out for him. You mentioned that you're there in South Africa for the BRICS Summit. He didn't attend because he couldn't, because of the potential of an arrest. President Putin, whether he is behind this or not, will certainly allow people to think he is, because he wants his adversaries to think he is.
Yeah, you know, we were watching him very closely this morning. He was on live video as opposed to recorded video yesterday. He looked, I have to say, very tired, almost anxious or nervous. His absence from here, when you have these big players like Xi Jinping of China, Mr. Modi of India here, shows his increasingly limited horizons, as well as his increasing isolation. It's not the same as being here in person. There's a lot of bilaterals going on. And I have to say, the other thing I noticed today, Saima, is that the foreign minister of Russia, Mr. Lavrov, basically looked like a puppet sitting there not doing much. But it was very noticeable. The other thing I can tell you from being here for a few days now is there's almost an affection for Russia here on the ground in South Africa because of the historical ties, especially with the ANC. And if you listen to South African media, some of it, they word for word report what Mr. Putin says. So that was a bit of a surprise for me. And one more thing, if I can, huge amount of Russian media here. I was sitting right next to them, and they're basically parroting everything that Mr. Putin says. But I think among the African leaders, especially those more to the north, who have gotten used to Wagner on the ground there, this is going to be a big shock to them to have him out of the equation.
Okay, for now, Michael Bociurkiw, thanks very much indeed for your analysis. Good to have you with us tonight